Good morning, Kahal Kadosh. Chodesh Tov V'Siman Tov. Beruchim Abahim to everybody in this very, very, very special edition of a daytime class, Sunday morning, with Rabbi Eli Mansour. I was telling the rabbi that for many, many years we had a yearly Hannuka, Elul, and sporadically in the middle, but we never tried it something during the daytime. So Rabbi Yosef, we are thankful to the Kahal Kadosh that is here physically, as well to the virtual world of Torah, which is running, I believe, a special Hannuka campaign to continue proceeding with the holy work of disseminating Torah all over the world. We'll share with the Kahal Kadosh very nether additional information via email and via WhatsApp. In honor of this magnificent day of today, second day of Rosh Chodesh Tevet, first day of Tevet, actually 7th day of Hannuka. We had a magnificent breakfast that the Kahal Kadosh benefited from it. I would like to announce the different sponsorship that we have for the special breakfast and also for the special class today. I'm reading it the way it was provided to me, not even in alphabetical order, by Mr. Itzvik Gansburg from Toronto, the Ilui Nishmat Zev Ben Elhanan Victor of Lima Livka Adel Batya, the Mishan family, in memory of the beloved grandfather, Mr. Jimmy Mishan Gamliel Ben Bahie, that recently returned his holy soul to the Almighty, Mr. A.B. Franco, the Honorable A.B. Franco from our synagogue, honoring all the rabbis of the Edmond J. Safra Synagogue, by the Ancona family, the Ilui Nishmat, the beloved grandfather, Shaul Ben Sara Ancona Alav Shalom, by Daniel Suiza for Berachah Naslaha in all his endeavors, Daniel Abraham Ben Mazal, Mr. Michael Betesh, the Ilui Nishmat, his wife, Natalie Nava Bat Denise Aliyah Shalom, by Mr. Clemi Elia, the Ilui Nishmat, his mother, Clara Bat Rosin, that today is the day of her Askara, by the children of Altun Bat Adel, that also today is the day of her Askara, by Yaakov Kobi Cohen, that also today is the day of her Askara, Raymond Rahma Bat Yakut, additionally by the Brule family from Brooklyn, New York, honoring the rabbi, and in memory of Shlomo Zalman Ben Baruch Aliyah Shalom, and by our congregation, honoring the memory of our founder, Mr. David Braca, David Ben Shafika Alav Shalom, Iratzon, that all the neshamot that we mentioned have an aliyah in Gan Eden, and may Hashem bless with great berachah naslaha to all the generous sponsors for this beautiful Sa'udah that we had in honor of Rosh Chodesh, and as well in honor of Rabbi Mansour's visit to our synagogue. At this moment, I'll do something that at this hour I hardly do, which is to stay quiet. Usually the class goes on, you know me already, but today I'm going to be in the listening mode like the rest of the Kahal, and we'll take the opportunity not only to express our gratitude for the rabbi. It doesn't take much to convince him to come to South Florida with 72 degrees compared to 34, 35 up north. So Baruch Hashem, the sun always shines, Hakar. Anytime you come, I want you to consider the Edmond J. Safra Synagogue an extension of your home. We know very well that you are leading with great success and great beracha the Edmond J. Safra Synagogue of Brooklyn, our sister synagogue, honoring the memory of one of the pillars of the Jewish world. We can say, Mr. Edmond Safra Alav Shalom, and we wish you to continue having great beracha naslaha in all your endeavors. Amen.
Rabbi Galimidi, I appreciate that very warm introduction. Just some advice. Next time, it's easier to announce who didn't sponsor. It is true that we both come from the same synagogue that shares the name of one of the greatest patrons and philanthropists in Jewish history, Mr. Edmond J. Safra. And it is my prayer, Rabbi, that I hope I should have half the success that you had over here in Florida, and I'll be doing very good then in Brooklyn, New York. You're a role model to all the Rabbanim, your work ethic, your beautiful shiurim, you you're a workaholic, and normally workaholic is a bad thing, but if you're a rabbi workaholic, it's a good thing because you're spending your whole day in spiritual endeavors. Ashrecha v'tov lach, your congregation is very lucky to have you at the helm. And as you know, I never refuse an invitation. The rabbi invites me because I feel very comfortable to be here today. I congratulate the board of directors, the president, and all those that are making this synagogue what it is today. I was here from the beginning, and I saw what it was, and now to see where it has come to, it is incredible and truly not, of course, with the help of God, but with the help of a lot of people that made the shtadlut to bring to the success. Rabotai, it's a Sunday morning. I won't keep you long. I know everybody has busy things to do here in Florida. But nonetheless, we came to say some words of the Devora in honor of Hannuka. I came to say a big hiddush this morning. What I'm telling you today comes from a great rabbi called Rabbi Isaac Hutner. He was the Rosh Hashiva of Yeshivat Haim in Berlin. He was a great, great Gaon. He writes this in a book that was printed called Pahad Yitzhak. He asked the following question. We are now entering the Parashiyot, Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayichi, that the primary personality that the Torah is talking about is Yosef, Yosef HaSaddiq. Much has been said about this great Tzaddik Yosef, who was one of the Shebatim. We don't talk too much about the other tribes. Not too much said about Naphtali or Zebulun or Gad ve'Asher. But Yosef has a lot of real estate at the end of the book of Bereshit. But he notices something. The last pasuk in Bereshit, Mamash, the actual last pasuk, and I'll read it in front of you. It says, and I quote, Vayamot Yosef. Yosef dies. Ben me'ah v'esed shanim. He was 110 years old. Vayahantu oto. They embalmed him. Vayisim ba'aron b'Mitzrayim, and they buried him in Mitzrayim. No problem. The Torah ends Bereshit by telling us of the death of Yosef. Only problem is, 2 pages later, when you start the book of Shemot, it says, Vayamot Yosef v'chol echad v'chol adorahu. It says again that Yosef died. Ask Rabbi Hutner, why does it have to say twice that Yosef died? There's no other tzaddik in the Torah that it mentions their death twice. Abraham died once. Yitzhak died once. Yaakov died once. And I promise you, Yosef also died once. So why does the pasuk write it twice? Why do you have to tell me at the end of Bereshit, Vayamot Yosef, and then at the beginning of Shemot again, Vayamot Yosef? It's a very, very strong question, and it needs deep analysis, which I came to do this morning. So he says, tremendous Kiddush. I ask you, please consider what I'm telling you this morning. It is of the utmost importance, paramount value. There's a rule. The rule is, Ma'aseh avot siman labanim. This rule means that when we study the lives of the avot, which are only 3, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, their lives were not only personal, their lives influenced the history of Klal Yisrael. Although they lived in a microcosm, but it had consequence to the macro. Whatever would happen to Abraham eventually would happen to his children, which means it's a precursor, or as they say, coming events. If you want to know what's going to happen to Klal Yisrael, study the stories of the Avot. It's almost like they were seeds that eventually germinated and produced a big blossom, and that blossom is Jewish history. The story of the Avot is a pre-enactment of what's going to happen to Klal Yisrael. Remember that lesson. Ma'aseh Avot, siman labanim. But Rabbi Hutner explains this principle and uses it in the following way. Each one of the Avot made a very valuable contribution to Klal Yisrael. And he says, what was Abraham's contribution? Don't tell me chesed. I didn't come here to tell you what you know already. We know Abraham is chesed. Put that on the side. That's obvious. He says, Abraham taught us that to be Jewish, you don't have to be born Jewish. You could come from parents that were not Jewish and become Jewish. After all, Abraham's father was Terah. His mother, Amtelah bat Kornevo, they weren't Jewish. And Abraham Avinu was the first of the Gerim, the Hilal Gerim. He came from the outside. So says Rabbi Hutner, that creates a format, it creates a system, a certain way in Klal Yisrael that we have a concept called Gerim. Because Abraham did it, it's possible. That becomes a possibility in Klal Yisrael, that a Jew can come from the outside. That's Abraham. What does Yitzhak bring? Well, Yitzhak is the first one that's born Jewish. Yitzhak didn't come from the outside. His father was Abraham and his mother was Sara. Those are Jewish parents. Yitzhak brings the concept that there will be a format in Klal Yisrael or a structure, that there'll be Jewish parents that bring Jewish children. You don't only have to be Jewish from the outside, but you can be Jewish from the inside. You can be born Jewish. So what did Yaakov bring to the table? What's more to bring? So he says something incredible. Yitzhak Abinu alav shalom is the first one to be born. He's born Jewish. But let's look at his children. Yitzhak Abinu has one child, Yaakov, the tzaddik, and Esav. Now they both must have been Jewish. Yaakov cannot be Jewish and Esav not Jewish, they're brothers. But what happened? Yaakov remained Jewish and Esav lost it. From Yitzhak, all you see is that it's possible to lose your Judaism. You could be born with it, but if you don't behave, and you make averot, and you make crimes, and you make sins, from Yitzhak you see from his children that it's possible to be born Jewish, but then to be out. But then to be ousted from Judaism. That's Esav. So what does Yaakov bring to the table? Yaakov Avinu has 12 children. And what do we know about the 12 children about Yaakov? They're all Jewish. Yaakov brings to Jewish history that once you are born Jewish, you're Jewish forever. No matter what you do, no matter how religious you are or how irreligious you are, no matter how observant you are or how not observant you are, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. It cannot be taken away from you. And even if a Jew will go to the church and they'll sprinkle holy waters on him, and God forbid he'll dress up and they'll put all the 8 begadim of the... Doesn't matter. A person can never forfeit his Judaism. He always has that spark that will return. So let's review. Abraham brings what? That you can become Jewish from the outside. Yitzhak Avinu brings what? That you can be born Jewish. But from Yitzhak we see that there's a Jew that's in and there's a Jew that's out. From Yaakov we learn that once you're born Jewish, nothing you could do in order to remove yourself from that process. Rabotai, we clear so far the 3 contributions? Wonderful. That's all I have to say. We didn't say anything yet. This is just an introduction. Now he says it's Chidush, what I really came to speak about. He says, but there is a 4th personality that also influences Jewish history. Now hold it. Ma'aseh Avot Siman Barim. There's only 3 Avot. As far as I know, there's not 4 Avot. 3 Avot. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Who else is able to influence Jewish history besides Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? He says, a big hadush, that Yosef HaSadiq, although he's one of the tribes, however, he was also elevated like one of the Avot in the sense that his life influenced Jewish history. It's a big hadush what I just said. So it's Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. I will say it like this. Yaakov is 3. Number 3, I'll call Yaakov 3a. Yosef is 3b. Yosef is an extension of Yaakov. And therefore, he also makes a great contribution. How do we know that Yosef has the ability to influence Jewish history? So he quotes the pasuk in last week's parasha, Ele toledot Yaakov, Yosef. These are the descendants of Yaakov. Well, Yaakov had 12 descendants. The Torah says, no. Regarding a descendant that is like Yaakov, there's only one. Ele toledot Yaakov. Who is like Yaakov? Yosef. He has the ability through his actions to influence and mold Jewish history. Beautiful. The question is, what was his contribution? What could he contribute? Already the Avot gave us everything. Converts from Abraham. That you're born Jewish from Yitzhak. That you always remain Jewish from Yaakov. What else is there left for Yosef? Says Rabbi Zakutno, that there was still a breach in the wall. There was a hole in the wall. And Yosef came and fixed the breach. And if Yosef didn't come, Klal Yisrael would be lost. Why? Because it's still possible for Klal Yisrael to become assimilated. You could be Jewish, but what happens if a Jewish man, goes with a Goya? Hannuka says if they have children, the child goes after the mother. And if the child goes after the mother, the child is a Goy. And therefore, we're not safe yet. Because even though we created the Jewish families, there's still a chance for the Jewish family to assimilate and marry out. And if the Jewish family marries out, we create Goyim, and there goes Klal Yisrael. So what is it worth that Yaakov raised all Jewish children? If his Jewish children marry out of the religion, there goes the family. The family, instead of becoming Bnei Yaakov, becomes Bnei Esav, Bnei Ishmael. So there was a big breach, or there was a leak in the pipe. And Klal Yisrael is able to drip out of that leaky pipe until Yosef comes. Let me explain. Yosef is a 17-year-old boy, handsome boys in Egypt. Torah tells us he worked for a fellow called Potiphar. Potiphar was an Egyptian minister. Potiphar had a wife, Mrs. Potiphar. The Midrash calls her Zolicha. Zolicha had her eyes on Yosef. And it says she would seduce him. Yom Yom, day in and day out. The Midrash writes, the clothes that she wore in the morning are not the same clothes that she wore in the evening. Some of our ladies have this minhag as well. But the point is, it was a very, very strong seduction. And Yosef, the pasuk says, resisted. What does the pasuk say how he resisted? Vayma'en. What does Vayma'en mean? He refused. And it came to a head on one day, the pasuk writes, Vahi kehayom. It was a day. Rashi tells us it was a day where the Goyim was celebrating a holiday. The pasuk writes, Vahi kehayom hazeh. Who knows? Chaf hayom, kehayom, chaf hayom. Maybe it was the 25th of December. I don't know which day it was. Chaf hayom. And they all went to church that day. And Eshet Potiphar told the husband, I'm not feeling well. I'm going to stay home. Knowing that Yosef is going to come to work, they'll be alone, and this is the chance for her to do what she wants. Pasuk says, Ve'en ish me'anshe habayit, sham babayit. Nobody from the household was there in the house. I'm reading this pasuk again. Ve'en ish me'anshe habayit. There was nobody from the household Sham babayit. That's a long way of saying nobody was home. But the silver bigdo, she grabs his shirt and she solicits him verbally. Shechva imi, be with me. He leaves his garment and he runs out. Says Rabbi Hutton, at that moment, you know what Yosef created? That the Jewish people in mass, Jewish people as a whole, will not assimilate. Because he refused the seduction of Eshet Potifar, that guarantees that there will always be Jewish families. Now it's true, it's very true, and I'm aware of this, that many Jews have gone to assimilation. They have walked in that false direction. But if Yosef would have fell to the prey and to the seduction of Eshet Potifar, that would have been the rule. Then all Jews would have been assimilated. Because that's Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim. If Yosef would have went with the Goya, that means Klal Yisrael would end up assimilating in totality. And then there would not be any more of Klal Yisrael. What Yosef did on that moment when he resisted the temptation was not only for himself, but he created a Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim, that there'll always be Jews that will remain loyal to their Jewish wives and their Jewish husbands and produce Jewish children, and Klal Yisrael as a family unit will always exist. I will argue today that Yosef's contribution is the most important of all the contributions. Because what does it mean? Yaakov, you created a Jewish family, but if we don't have an insurance on this Jewish family, if we don't have a protection, what preserves the Jewish family? It's very nice you created 12 children, all tzaddikim, but there's a leaky faucet here, there's a leaky pipe. What's going to protect the children of Yaakov from not marrying out? And if they marry out, there's no more Klal Yisrael. Yosef comes along and resists the temptation of Eshet Potifar, and the pasuk says, "Vayma'en." Now, I don't know if any of you know the ta'amim of the Torah, but if you look at the notes on the word Vayma'en, which means he refused, there's a very rare note. There's only 4 of them in the whole Torah. It's called Shalshelet. Shalshelet is like a bolt of lightning. It looks like a zigzag. I'm not going to sing it for you this morning, but there's only 4 of them in the Torah. And I asked, on that word Vayma'en, he refused. Why does the Torah use the Shalshelet? Because Shalshelet in English means a chain. Like a Shalshelet, a lady wears a Shalshelet. What does his refusal have to do with a chain? Because by him refusing, he guaranteed the chain of Klal Yisrael would not be broken. He guarantees Shalshelet Yuhasin, that the lineage of Klal Yisrael will remain unbroken. The Vayma'en creates what's called Shalshelet, a chain that's unbroken. Rabotai, if we have here with us this morning the great members of this holy synagogue that are all Jewish, that are all married Jewish, that have Jewish children, you can give the credit and the thanks to Yosef HaSadiq. On that day that he resisted, it was a great, great benefit not only for Yosef, but for us. Now I'd like to say something. As you know, I'm not one to keep away from controversial issues, as you know. And I will not make today an exception to that rule as well. Nor do I think what I'm going to say now is controversial. I think it's important that you hear it. The pasuk writes that when she was talking to him yom yom, every day, velo shama eleha, he didn't listen. Lishkav etzla, he didn't listen to lie next to her. Lihiyot ima, to be with her. It's a double language. To lie next to her and to be with her. Why the double language? What I'm telling you now, says Rav Hida, he says Eshet Potifar was a Goya. And she came and seducing Yosef, and all of a sudden she says, wait, there's no way he's going to go with me. I'm a Goya. He's too big of a Sadiq. So you know what she said? I'll convert. I'll convert. I'll become Jewish. Whatever I have to do, the mikveh, I have to put a hat on my head, whatever I have to do to become Jewish, I'll become Jewish. So Yosef says, Velo shama, he did not listen. Lishkav ima as a Goya, velehiyot ima as a Jewess. Why? Because that's a fake conversion. She wasn't converting to become Jewish. She was converting to be with Yosef. And Yosef understood that that's going to be a challenge in the future of Klal Yisrael. Yosef is creating not only his own life story, but the story of Klal Yisrael. That there's going to be situations where those are going to come and say, I want to be Jewish. But their intentions are going to be compromised. They're going to have ulterior motives. You want to become Jewish? Why don't you move to Bnei Barak? Why don't you move to Mea Shearim? No, I want to be Syrian. I'll get 3 houses. I'll get to have all the luxuries. They don't give me that in Bnei Barak. Mea Shearim, they don't give me that. So therefore we must be suspicious of what's your motivation. Eshet Potiphar wasn't Ruth HaMoaviyah. When Ruth converted, her mother-in-law Naomi said, you probably will never get married. And what did Ruth say? Nonetheless. That's Geyoret Tzedek, and that's 1 in a million. In the case of Eshet Potiphar, she was only interested in one thing, being with Yosef. So if it means to convert to Judaism and I'll get what I want, no problem. And therefore Yosef recognized that that'll be a potential danger for the future of his children, that there'll be those that will promise to join the ranks of Judaism, but they have ulterior motives. And therefore Yosef says, Velo shama eleha, lishkav ima when she is a Goya, veliyot ima when she's converted. Now the question is, what protected Yosef? How did Yosef resist the temptation? You have to remember, 17 years old, handsome as could be. He's the only Jew in Egypt. Even Chabad wasn't there at that time. There was nobody there. He's the only Jewish guy. How was he able to resist the temptation? So I'd like to offer you a beautiful interpretation. Yaakov Avinu, his father. Yaakov Avinu, it says, was learning for 63 uninterrupted years. Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. 63 years he's learning. Now his father tells him it's time to go get married. Okay? Mother tells him to go get married. He leaves. Vayetze Yaakov. But he doesn't go to get married. What does he do? He checks himself into a yeshiva. What yeshiva? Shem Va'evet. They didn't have Torah Yosef in those days. Shem Va'evet. And what does he do in Shem Va'evet? He learns for an additional 14 years. And I ask a simple question. Yaakov, you're learning for 63 years. What more can they teach you in Shem Va'evet in another 14 years? You graduated already. You got your semicha. What does he need to learn in Shem Va'evet? You know what Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky said, Alav Shalom? He said, Yaakov Avinu was learning for 63 years where? By his father's house. In a hermetically sealed environment. He's learning the Kedusha, no interaction with the rest of the world. It was a learning of pure Kedusha v'Tahara. But now Yaakov Avinu is thrown out into the world. Now he has to meet up with Lavan, with the Goyim, with all the negative influences in the culture. He wasn't prepared with the Torah that he learned for 63 years. That was a Torah of insulation. Now he needs to study a Torah that's going to protect him in the world. So he needs to find a yeshiva that has a Rosh Yeshiva that lived in a bad generation and can teach Yaakov how to overcome it. So who did he find? Yeshivat Shem. Who is Shem? the son of Noah. Shem lived in the worst generation, Dora Mabul. And guess what? He survived Dora Mabul and became a Rosh Hashiva. Who better suited to teach Yaakov how to live in a toxic environment and to survive it? So he says, this Torah I need to study. It's a different Torah, same book, but a different angle, a different perspective. So for 14 years, he studied Yeshivat Shem Ve'evet, and Shem gave him all the tricks. And this is how you remain spiritually sound in a toxic environment. He graduates Yeshivat Shem Ve'evet, and he goes. And guess what? It worked. 14 years or 20 years in Laban's house. What does he say after 20 years? Im Laban garti, betariag mitzvot shamarti, velo lamati v'ma'aseh bara'im. He had no influence on me. Vayavo Yaakov Shalem. Yaakov returns from Laban's house whole. Shalem betorato. He was complete in his Torah. He didn't give up an iota. The Torah of Shem Ve'evet protected him. Now watch. Listen closely. The pasuk says, Yosef Sadiq. How old was he when he got sold to Egypt? Ben Sheva Shana. He was 17 years old. I asked a simple question. Why do I have to know how old he was? And if he was 16, and if he was 21, what's the difference? We know he was young. But God wants you to know he was 17. It's a magic number. The pasuk says, the Yisrael ahabet Yosef. Yaakov Avinu loved Yosef. You know why he loved him? Ki ben zikunim hu lo. Listen to these words. Ki ben zikunim hu lo. What does that mean? It says he saw in Yosef that he was bar hakim. He was a hakam. And it says in Rashi that Yaakov taught Yosef all the Torah that he learned in Shem Ve'evet. He gave it over to Yosef. All the Torah of Shem Ve'evet, he gave it over. And I asked the question, why do you only give him over the Shem Ve'evet Torah? What about the first 63 years? You know what the explanation is? He said he's going to need that Torah. Because one day Yosef, like me, is going to find himself in a bad environment. He's going to find himself in a bad culture, in a bad society, in a degenerate place. He's going to need the Torah of Shem Ve'evet. So therefore, he taught him the Torah not up to 63 years. That's easy Torah. He taught him the 14 years of Torah Shem Ve'evet to protect them. And that's why it says he was 17 years old. Because how old is a child when we start to teach them Torah? 3. So the Torah is saying he started to teach him at 3 and he was 17. That's how we know he taught him the 14 years of Shem Ve'evet. Understand? That's how we know it was the 14 years, because the Torah says he was 17. You start teaching at 3. Now my question is, did it work? Did it work? Absolutely. Yosef now was with Eshet Potiphar. The pasuk says, when he came in that day, Vayike hayom, Vayavo habayta, ve'en ish me'anshe habayit sham babayit. There was nobody from the household that was in the house. You know what that sounds to me like? That there was somebody that was not from the household that was in the house. And who was that? Yaakov Avinu. The Gemara says that when he was being seduced, he looked at the window, and what does he see? He sees the image of his father. That's why it says, Ve'en ish me'anshe habayit sham babayit. There was nobody from the household that was home, but there was somebody that was not from the household that was there. And all of a sudden he sees his father's image in the window. And Yaakov says, I taught you for 14 years for this moment. All the Torah of Shem Ve'evet is for this moment. You're like me. I created the Jewish home. You have to preserve it. If you're going to fall by Eshet Potiphar, the Jewish people are going to assimilate totality, and there's no Torah Yisrael. Yaakov is begging his son, don't fall. You have to breach the wall. You have to close the pipe. There's a leak. Yosef, the Torah that I taught you, ki ben zekunim hu lo. Now pay attention. What was Yosef's reaction? Vayma'en. What does Vayma'en mean? He refused. In what zechut did he refuse? Because the Torah that he learned from his father. That's why if you take the words, listen closely, 5 words, ki. The last letter of the word ki is a yud. Ben, the last letter of ben is a nun. Zikunim, the last letter of zikunim is a ben. Hu, the last letter is an aleph. Lo, the last letter is a vav. So sofet tevot vayma'en. You know where he got the strength to be vayma'en? Ki ben zikunim hu lo, because he taught him the Torah. This is a great lesson. This is a great lesson. The Torah that we have is an insurance policy against assimilation. Back where I come from in Brooklyn, they talk about crisis. One of the crises that we're talking about now is a tuition crisis. I'm not happy about that terminology, to be honest with you. The crisis that they talk about is that the yeshiva tuition is too expensive. Now, I might agree with them on that, but I don't call it a crisis because nobody's talking about the winter vacation crisis. When they spent $25,000 to go to Aruba for 10 days, nobody is screaming, oh, we have a winter vacation crisis, because they could find the $25,000 to go on a vacation. That money they could find, but they have a hard time finding money to send their kids to the yeshiva. Why is that a crisis and this is not a crisis? It's a matter of priorities. And I will argue with you. When I write the check for my children's tuition, I look at it like I'm writing a check to an insurance company. I pay a lot of insurance as well as you do. Auto insurance, house insurance, fire insurance. Person goes to the casino to give them insurance on a bet. All day long we're paying insurance. What's the concept of insurance? You pay a small premium so you don't have to pay the bigger price. So you'll be protected from the bigger damage. Yeshiva tuition is assimilation insurance. It's a small premium that saves you from the big damage, God forbid. Because my question to those parents that do not send their kids to yeshiva, how much now do you want to pay to stop them from marrying the goy? Now you'll pay him millions of dollars, you'll take the filling out of your teeth. You'll give the cufflinks off your shirt. But now it's too late. Because you didn't want to pay the insurance, the premium to the yeshiva. Now you have to pay the bigger price. And by the way, the bigger price is too late. Yaakov Abinu protects Yosef. How? Because he taught him Torah. Our congregations are still Jewish because we have Torah. Torah is a weapon. And it is the only weapon that can preserve our children from intermarrying. And don't think there's any other solution or any other option. Don't tell me build synagogues. Synagogues are very nice, but the Reform and Conservative also built temples. Look what happened to them. Most of the people sitting in the chairs of those temples are not even Jewish. So building synagogues doesn't do it. You'll tell me chesed. Go look at the names on all the hospitals. They're all secular Jews that do a lot of chesed, feeding hungry people in Rwanda. They're doing all great things. But guess what? It didn't keep them Jewish. There's only one item that can preserve authentic Jewish families, and that is the study of Torah. It's wonderful to have a Bet Knesset, but this Bet Knesset understood that if we don't have a kollel on the second floor, and the rabbi is not going to give midrashot in the midrash down here on the first level, and there's not going to be programs for the kids, what type of programs? The book, teaching them. Then all this is fluff. All this is just a nice building, but it won't hold the children from assimilation. That's the key. The synagogue is very important to bring the people in. But once they come in, it's not enough to give them a sidur. A sidur cannot protect from assimilation. Nor can a Tehillim book. Only this book, the Chumash and the Talmud. And we learn it from Yaakov. What stopped Yosef? Ki ben zikunim ulo. By ma'en, that's the shalshelet. Now, I'm almost done. Although I gave you a big talk this morning, I know some of you are saying to yourself, doesn't this rabbi know that it's Hannuka? He comes here to our shul, there's a menorah right over here somewhere, and he doesn't even talk about Hannuka. What kind of chutzpah is this? So for those that did not give me the benefit of the doubt, I forgive them. And I will now connect everything I said to Hannuka, although my contract does not make me responsible to connect anything to Hannuka, but consider it a bonus. What does this got to do with Hannuka? Listen closely. This, what I'm saying, is from the Rambam. All of you heard about the Yevanim, the Greeks, but I don't know if you heard about another group which was very, very significant. They were not called Yevanim, they were called Mityavnim. What is the Mityavim? Those are the Jews that assimilated and married out to become like Greeks because they were enamored by the Greek culture. You know, the Greeks have all their art and all their beauty. A lot of it is without clothes on, mind you. And they have their Olympics when they run around the gymnasiums throwing discus, javelins, and worship of the body. And the Jews were enamored by this. And a lot of them, and when I say a lot, the Ramban writes, 99% of the Jews in that generation assimilated. If you can believe it. He says we were this close. My fingers are close to each other. We were this close to losing the entire nation. Minus Yohanan Kohen Gadol and his family, Matityahu Banav, besides that beautiful family that was preserved, we were this close to assimilation. What saved us? Well, if you look at the Siddur comes and says, you know what saved us? What did the Greeks do? They were so smart. They didn't get up and say, Rabotai, we're making a decree, you must assimilate. They knew nobody would listen. So you know what they did? They were very clever. Look at the Siddur, it says, when the wicked Greek Empire rose up, and what was their decree? They said, as long as we can stop them from learning Torah, it'll happen by itself. You don't have to promote assimilation. You just have to make a law you can't learn Torah, and it'll happen by itself. And they were right. Don't you understand? This is our weapon. And the Goyim know it. The Goyim know it. You remember the night of Kristallnacht? Everybody knows the night of broken glass. That is a wrong, in my opinion. That is a shameful way to talk about that night, as if